So what would you like to work on?
Well, there's been changes in circumstances at home over the last kind of couple of years, really. Basically, my partner's now at home full-time, and more I'm away from home. I've got a little boy who's now 9, he's just 9. And the bit for me is about how I'm feeling and how I'm coping with not being kind of mum, if you like, prime carer, really. And it is about the emotional stuff for me rather than the practicalities, because Bernard's at home all the time. My mum lives very near, so Sam's very happy and very looked after and very cared for. But I guess it's just my struggle about having moved from being the absolute centre of him and his kind of world, really, to being somebody that he's very pleased to see and is very important in his life. But I haven't quite got that kind of that central bit, and it's about me dealing with that, really.
Has anything specifically happened to make you feel like this?
I think maybe just as he's getting older, as he's getting, just feels like the level of sharing that goes on between Bernard and Sam, and Bernard and my mum to some degree. It's the familiarity that I see every day of what they share, and I'm kind of picking it up third hand or after it's happened. And maybe it's about Sam being more vocal now as he's older, so he'll be telling me what he's been doing with Dad today, what he's been doing with Gran today. And sometimes when I'm there and he'll go to say Mum and he don't, he says Dad. Do you know what I mean? So it's them kind of triggers that I know are kind of... And the bit about I've got decisions to make about other career things that are coming up, and it's about not wanting to go down that path without looking at what meets my needs emotionally as well as the home's kind of practical needs and stuff, really.
So it's you're not being the prime carer, and I can see you're pretty choked at the moment, and Dad being there all the time. So in real terms, practically your son's being well looked after, and
absolutely
Grandma's around as well. But the feelings are what?
That I'm missing out, I think.
You're missing out.
Yeah. That not only is he kind of practically, I mean, what they share is wonderful. Excuse me. But it's almost like it's me that's missing out. Do you know what I mean?
Right, and that's going along as well with deciding on a career.
It is, yeah. One that might possibly mean more hours, not less. And just kind of wanting to stop it, I think, and think, how do I get my needs met as well? Do you know what I mean? Because it does feel a bit like it's not a logical process at all. It's in the sense that there's no guilt in terms of, I don't feel like there is, about I ought to be doing this or I ought to be doing that. What's there is very wonderful and very safe and very secure, really, for Sam. It's just that sense of I'd like to be a little bit more in there and sharing that instead of kind of just what feels like visiting it sometimes.
And just kind of recalling your son going to talk to you, and instead of saying Mum says Gran, just get in touch with how that feels. What's the feeling you have for that?
I think it's a loss and a jealousy, really.
Yeah. Jealousy towards?
Only because it's not, it's usually actually Bernard that he says, Dad he usually says, rather than Gran particularly. But I think it's about just that I want that level of closeness that they've got. And I do have it to a large scale, but for the number of years when you were younger. So it feels like it's about a loss for me. Really.
How do you think you might handle that loss?
When I've been through the phase of the practical things, like, oh well, when I am at home, I'll do more with Sam, or I'll but like I say, in terms of juggling decision making, maybe it's about trying to balance the kind of practical responsibility that seems more mine, for kind of making sure that we're financially safe and things like that, and maybe giving license to say it's okay if I don't want to work 46 hours a week. In reality, we're not going to be struggling if I only work 35. And I guess it's trying to get me to a place where that's okay.
What sort of options have you got?
Again, it feels like if I step out of what will happen automatically and look at what the choices are, then quite a few really, because I could probably, without dramatically altering the lifestyle that we have, maybe work 30 hours a week. And it's the kind of work I do as well. It's like I'm gone for a long time, and I'm gone overnight. So I know that part of what I miss is that routine. I don't get him up in the morning. I don't put him to bed on the night. Yeah, I do sometimes, but not all the time.
And your work is in?
Social work.
So I'm feeling this inner conflict about social worker caring for others.
That's it, yeah.
Being torn in two different ways.
And there's also the other bit of me that knows that both bits do feed me. So it's not that I idealise that I'd want to be at home all day, because I wouldn't. So maybe the part of it that I'm working out for me as well is, am I not there because I practically don't have to be there? I have to be at work. Or how much is it that I'm selfish enough to want the other bits in my life as well? So I guess that bit's around for me, if I'm honest.
Where's the selfishness come from?
Again, it's not a logical thought, because if I look at it logically, there's no reason why I shouldn't have my needs met in lots of areas. But emotionally, it's the bit about maybe a typical mother might be happy staying at home, kind of being there, really. So I am aware that some of what takes me away is by choice as well as necessity. Yeah. So it's like I feel like I want it all, and that's maybe where the selfish bit comes from.
So somewhere along the line someone said, you can't have it all? Or?
I don't know if they ever did, but I think as a society we kind of...
Right.
I think there is an aura that says you can't have it all.
What would you like? Forget society and forget all the little ancestral voices. What would you like, Leslie?
I think I'd probably like, ideally, I'd like to work from home, so that I could kind of get him off to school, do the things that meet my needs and his, and then work from home when he's gone, be there when he comes back. The ideal picture, really.
What would you have to do to achieve that?
I think maybe as a family we'd have to rethink the financial aspects of the way we live in some ways, and maybe take risks that won't come easy to me, really. I've always had a professional job, I've always had a salary that comes in once a month, yeah. So it does feel about risk in that sense. There are some genuine opportunities there that I haven't pursued very much, because with that comes the risk of there might be more real, like training opportunities and things like that. Work that I have been offered that I could do. But it does feel that it is to do with I've got a mortgage to pay, or we've got a mortgage to pay, and very much at the minute me working as I do is what kind of provides that kind of security. And asking as a family unit for us to kind of put a little bit of risk or more risk into that feels hard, really.
So there's the mortgage bit, there's the wanting to be with your son, there's the wanting the career, there's perhaps a bit more training so that the career can move on, and there's kind of old things of I should be at home and he should be at work, or a little less full-time work for you, and not doing the right thing.
Yeah, I don't feel at all that that Bernard ought to be at work. I look at what him and Sam share, and I don't think for a minute he didn't ought to have that. Yeah, it's just that I want some of it as well.
So tell me 2 things you could do to get a bit more of it. The very thing you want to have this closeness with your son.
On a small scale, I could maybe talk to Bernard, and I have before. Yeah, he is aware of kind of my missing, my loss, really. About maybe making space when I'm there, because if you ask Dad regularly for something, then that's kind of automatic. So if he's there, it would tend to be Dad, not Mum. Yeah, and it isn't any sense of that. I think that if Dad weren't there, that Mum's not good enough, or Mum wouldn't do. It's that automatic bit about that comes from the regularity and the routine and the order, really. So I could maybe talk to Bernard again about helping me make some space in that sense.
That sounds good. Anything else?
What else could I do? I guess again maybe I could talk to Bernard about the risks in terms of if we change the order or the security of things, really, in the sense of that I have been offered work that I could do privately, but it's the risk that's associated to that, and maybe if I shared that rather than what feels like maybe take responsibility for it.
How's that feeling?
Feels like maybe something that I've put in that I've put on the table that I'm aware of, but I haven't actually touched, that maybe I might pick up on that. and look at a bit more, really.
Right. Okay, so just reflecting on our time together. What things have come out for you?
How much responsibility I take singularly rather than collectively for the financial security of the house.
Yes.
How I have a sense of awareness that maybe it's selfish if I want it all.
And that's irrational.
Yeah, totally irrational. And that nobody else is actually going to make that judgment, really, that it's mine. Yeah. And maybe that there are choices, really. I don't have to kind of go with the path that will naturally happen if I don't stop it, really. So maybe it's license to stop it is what I've got, and at least kind of look at and make a conscious choice, maybe, rather than
Sounds good.
go with the flow.
Yeah, it sounds good. Okay, can we leave that there? Okay. It's been really lovely working with you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much for coming. And just take a deep breath now. Right, I'm crossing all your bits next. Take a nice deep breath. Okay. Just tell me 2 things that you're really, really good at.
I'm really good at.
2 things you're really, really good at.
Being there for people.
Yeah.
Helping people see light when it's dark.
And now 2 things you're really good at as a mum.
As a mum. The emotional warmth and security, really. The bit about that if Sam's in a hard place in any sense, then it will be Mum.
Yeah. And what I'm visualising as you're talking is I can see you with this great guilt stick, you know. I don't deserve to, you know, have both the loving mama and the job. And that, you know, that tremendous amount of caring capacity. Perhaps another way of looking might be it'd be very selfish not to be giving it to others as well as your lovely son. You're coming across to me so genuine and loving, and there's a lot there to give to other people too. Okay, so keep celebrating those things. You're really wonderful.
All right.
Okay, thanks
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jean, you've just done the interview with Leslie, which I've just seen. What were the main counselling skills that you were actually hoping to get across in that session?
The most important one, of course, you know, as we both know, is a listening one.
Right.
And listening to the music behind the words.
Right.
And just allowing her to talk. So I was trying to show empathic listening. There were lots of things I wanted to say, but you know, it really was just about listening. But the other important basic skill was the reflection. And that really is important, because while she's talking, what I'm picking up, if I reflect that to her, as you know, that gives her the opportunity then to kind of look at it out here. And if I've got it wrong, that's really good, because that does mean that we then go on my having got it right.
Right. Right.
And when she hears it sort of out here, she can sort of look at it from a different angle, which I think happened about 2/3 of the way through. There was some
There was a shift,
realisation.
wasn't there?
Yeah.
Was that move?
Yeah.
I was very aware of your use of silence, being able to sit while she thought and gave her the space to come up with her own ideas and her own solutions rather than you imposing ideas on her. And that seemed to work really well. Is that very important in terms of basic counselling?
Incredibly. When I asked about the outcomes, you know, there was a little sort of voice in me thinking, well, you've got this choice and that choice and the other choice.
Yeah.
And, but it was about letting, as you say, letting her come up with, you know, her choices and
Right.
recognising the consequences of those choices. although I didn't use that language, but I was listening for the consequences which she discovered for herself.
Right. What I noticed when she was talking was that, you know, basic issues in counselling were coming up. Loss and conflict, two key ones in counselling.
Yeah,
Conflict about what she was going to do in terms of her relationship with her husband and son, and also the kind of loss of, if I have this choice, I lose this other thing. And where do you think those issues of loss and conflict fit for people who are learning basic counselling skills?
I think the loss is in dealing with emotions and just sitting and being with those emotions, because there were a few tears there, and there was a bit of choking going on as well. So along with that silence, as you said, so with the loss, it's staying silent, and also with the conflict, pointing out that you're hearing the conflict, not giving the solutions. Counselling isn't about giving solutions or information. It might be about giving information from time to time, but it's not giving solutions, but pointing out, you know, I can hear the conflict.
One of the things that I realise that people do who are new to counselling is that they identify with the problem, and certainly for me, watching the video, watching the interview, I was aware of so many people around the world saying, that's my conflict, that's my difficulty. How do I have enough for myself and yet give enough? What do you do about that, where people, you may recognise that you share some of their feelings?
Absolutely vital you don't join in and say, you think you've got problems, you ought to hear mine. I know just what you mean. And how many times do you hear people say, tell me about it? You know, and there was a little bit of me remembering, you know, my going to work and my son, and, you know, and there's a great, for the best motives in the world to say, oh, I know just how you feel.
I know, I've been there.
Yeah. So it really, really is important as a basic counselling skill that you don't join in with your own stuff. That, you know, it's not a friendship, it's not a two-way chat, it's counselling, and therefore your things are put on one side because you're giving all that attention to the client.
Right. I think that point is really important, that counselling is not a conversation. Counselling is a different kind of relationship, and it's not about just having cosy tea and biscuits.
Absolutely right.
Thanks for that, Jean.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
Hello.
And thank you for coming. And what would you like to work on, Linda?
It's a problem I've had for about 12 years. It's regarding my father, and it's a lot of resentment that builds up in myself, especially over the 12 years. 12 years ago my mum died, and very shortly afterwards my dad moved in a lady friend, but he didn't actually tell me anything about this, and actually up to now we've never discussed it. But I resented that quite a lot, and as the years have passed by I've got a little bit more used to it and decided that, you know, I have to let bygones be bygones. But every time I have an emotional problem, he's never there to support me. And it always goes back to when Mum died in my mind, and a lot of resentment's building up. And recently we had a little bit of an argument, which we've never had an argument before. And immediately I went back to this stage in my mind of when Mum died, what happened, the events afterwards when this lady friend moved in, which was 6 weeks after Mum died. And I just feel that I don't get any emotional support from him, and I feel that it's affecting me, and I just thought if, you know, I could talk through it, maybe I'd feel better.
You feel resentment?
Yes, I do. I feel a lot of resentment. I feel resentment. There's a lot of questions I need to ask, and I can't speak to him very well. I suspected he was seeing someone before Mum died, and then after she actually died, everything went out of my mind. And it was one of his neighbours who told me this other lady had moved in. And there's a lot of questions I would like to ask him now, but he's the type that he will just walk away, won't speak about them. And I find that this resentment's building up from 12 years ago, and it's just topping up and topping up.
So Mum died 12 years ago. You think Dad was having some relationship before she died?
Yeah.
You weren't told about this other, you say, lady moving in, and a neighbour told you about that.
Yeah.
And is that the same person that's still with him now?
Yes, it is, yes.
So she's been with him for some time then?
Yes, yeah.
And so the resentment is what, to your father not telling you, or resentment to your father moving this person in with him?
I think originally it was this lady moving in so quickly. But I think, if I really think about it, it's the resentment that he didn't tell me.
Right.
And I feel that he should have trusted me enough. Well, I think he owes it to me, really, as being his daughter, that if someone is moving in there, he should have, even if it was telling me, you know, he's my father, he doesn't have to ask my permission, but I do feel that he should have spoken to me about it.
Okay.
He doesn't like confrontations whatsoever, and in a way I'm very much like him. I don't like confrontations, but it was very, very important. I was devastated when Mum died, and I knew she was going to die. It wasn't anything unexpected, but I was totally devastated, and I needed him at that stage, and I thought, rightly or wrongly, that he needed me, and he just seemed to put me to one side and go to this lady. So I built a little bit of resentment there, because I haven't got any brothers or sisters, and I felt that he was the only one who would understand how I felt. So he wasn't there when Mum died for me, which was kind of a 50-50 thing, that I needed him and I thought he needed me. And then lots of things have happened over the years, and which is more or less the same. When I've needed him, he hasn't been there. And then I feel resentful, and I go immediately back in my mind to when Mum died and what happened then, and the resentment just, well, blows up then.
I'm hearing two sorts of things. You know, this keep coming back to when Mum died is sounding a bit to me like you've not really dealt with Mum dying.
No, I don't think I have.
And then I'm hearing the only child. Only child you are?
Yeah.
And Dad, father, daddy, how do you refer to him?
Dad.
Dad. Then not having only daughter when Mum dies, but then turning to this lady. You're not giving the lady a name.
Margaret.
Right. Resentment at his not wanting you when you're needing him. I'm hearing something else behind that, something about where will that leave me if he's sort of with her. Can I just check that out with you? There's resentment about her being there with him in terms of...
There was resentment there initially. That has now lapsed. I don't particularly feel any resentment towards Margaret.
Right.
I have been married before. This is my second marriage, and for a number of years after Mum died, my ex-husband didn't want anything to do with Margaret, and he created a bit of a situation. But since I've remarried, we've been introduced to Margaret, and the situation is okay.
And your present husband is getting on better with her than your ex-husband?
Yes, he's fine.
Right, so he's kind of helping build out those bridges, is he?
Yes, he is, very much, yeah.
Between you and Margaret, which sounds to me as if that's perhaps making your dad feel better?
Oh yes, I think Dad feels quite fine about it. They'll call into our house, or we'll go there. You know, the situation is much better. It's more as a family situation now, which it wasn't for a number of years. But that's kind of, to me anyway, a different issue. I've dealt with that issue, and I've got that out of the way.
It feels dealt with. It feels
dealt with. I
yes.
can work with that situation.
What's kind of surprising me is this 14 years ago, and can you say some of these things to your dad that you're saying to me?
I tried once, and I got very, very upset, and My dad is very, very good at being poor me. So if you say anything, he totally wipes over it, or he won't acknowledge it, and then he turns it round to, well, poor me, I was in this situation, what am I going to do? So then you end up dealing with him and still not dealing with any issues that you've got. So I do tend to just push everything I feel to the back of my mind until something happens where I feel that I should or need his support, and I don't get it, so immediately it all pops to the top of my mind and comes back, and this is what I'm not dealing with. I want to put it to rest.
When you think you're not getting the support, can you simply say to him, I don't feel I'm getting support from you, Dad?
Yeah, I've said it.
You can say that.
And he'll say, oh, I don't know how you can say that. He's very supportive. I've had numerous operations. He's very supportive with that. He comes to the hospital all the time. He'll run my daughter places. In that respect, he's very, very supportive. It's emotional support.
So can you say that to him? It's emotionally, you're not supporting me.
No.
You can't say that.
No. I've tried, and I think I once said something, and he just skimmed over it, and it was back to himself again.
What would you like to hear from him?
I think I'd like him to say, I love you.
Can you ask him for that?
No.
And what's stopping you?
I don't know.
You do know.
Maybe I'm afraid that he might not.
So the worst thing that can happen is?
That he doesn't say it. Don't know.
Has he ever said he loves you?
Maybe when I was a little girl. My mum did all the time.
Do you tell him that you love him?
No.
What does that tell you?
It tells me an awful lot, really. I'm afraid to give emotionally to him.
Are you still punishing him?
No, I don't think so.
So what makes you afraid to give him emotional love?
I'm frightened what would happen. He might just say, oh, don't be so daft or something, and that would devastate me. But he says it to my daughter.
Does she say it to him?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Could that be the reason? She's actually giving him permission to say that he loves his granddaughter because she's saying, I love you, Grandad.
And maybe if I did say it, then I'm sure he would say it back, really.
What you're in at the moment is a no-win situation. You're not going to say it, he's not going to say it, and you're going to go on not saying it. So either way, it's no-win. But if you actually say it, the fantasy can be much worse than the reality. He's quite likely to say, not I love you back, but he's probably more likely to say, you know I love you. You know, do you think you can do that? Do you think you can do that? Can you start that?
I don't know, it's very difficult.
You do know.
Yes, I do know.
So do you think you can start that?
Yes.
Great. We don't have a great deal of time, but I've got the feeling that, you know, Mum dying is an issue that really needs dealing with. Would you like to just say about how she died and how you felt when she died?
She'd been ill for a number of years, and she had a disease called Raynaud's disease, and very quickly it went to systemic sclerosis. It's all the fingers ulcerated, and it went internally, and they told us that she would die. And there was a little bit of an issue with that because Mum was very, very ill, and I wanted Dad to go with me to see the specialist, and I made an appointment, and an hour before we were due there, he backed out of going, and I had to go by myself, and really inside I knew what he was going to tell me, and he told me that Mum only had 6 months to live. So I had to come back and tell Dad this, and he denied that as well. He said that he was lying and Mum was okay.
He denied what the doctor was saying?
Yes, sorry, yeah. So I felt maybe then that I hadn't got support. I needed support to go and see this doctor, and had to go by myself, and that was horrible. So I knew that she was going to die, but still inside you don't think they are. You think, you know, maybe it won't happen. And when she did die, I just felt very, very empty. And how was I going to cope? And then I started building up, because I got my daughter and I had to cope for her. And then I found out about Margaret moving in, and maybe I didn't deal with the bereavement as I should have, because then I was very upset by someone moving into Mum's house, and the emphasis kind of moved. So I do think I didn't face the bereavement properly at the time.
What sort of feelings do you think are around when somebody dies?
Anger. I think you probably do feel anger, sadness, emptiness, confusion.
And often guilt.
Yes, guilt.
And what the books don't tend to say is often blame as well. You know, where can I put this? Who can I blame?
Yeah.
I'm just getting the feeling, you know, Dad got the blame. The
Yeah,
woman
maybe, good, yeah.
moving in, which is a kind of distraction for you from actually dealing with, you know, the loss of your mum. And don't underestimate, you know, the pain and the hurt and the difficulty, you know, of losing, you know, your mother dying, not losing her, of your mother dying.
I think I actually needed to think these feelings through with my dad, which I was never allowed to do. And maybe I needed to hear his vulnerability as well. And I didn't, you see.
Because he was being all, be strong.
Yes, yeah.
And if your dad was sitting there, your dad might be saying he was doing that for his, you know, his daughter Linda, who he loved so much, and that, you know, he couldn't afford to break down because he had to support you.
I realised that, but I think both of us, as you say, it's in a no-win situation. I think both of us are losing out.
'Cause you're not communicating now either, are you?
No, not at all.
You didn't communicate then, and you're continuing that pattern of, he should know what I'm thinking, he should know what I want to hear. And as I say, you know, he might be thinking, feeling those same thoughts. Did you have the opportunity of saying goodbye to your mum?
No, not really. But I did spend an awful lot of time with her, and it was a nice time with knowing that she was going to die. I spent every day with her, and we talked about lots of things. It was a nice time, and it's a time that I'm really pleased I had. And we talked about her childhood, my childhood, funny things, sad things, and a lot of love was shown. There's a lot of sadness too, because that was maybe a false situation. She never talked about it, and I never talked about.
There you go again.
About it, but that was a protective sort of thing. But we both understood what was happening, although it wasn't spoken. But that was a very, very nice time, and I look back on that time with a lot of happy memories.
In fact, when you're talking about your mum, Linda, your eyes are actually dancing. You know,
I'll probably cry now.
But it's, you know, it's memories and recalling love and happy times. And perhaps there is still something to do with that. Perhaps you need to be in your bedroom and talk to an empty chair and tell your mum some of the things you didn't say. That could be a good run-in to telling your dad some of the things that you're not saying. That, you know, might be a good time to do it before he dies.
Yeah. I think you're right.
What's coming over strongly is, you know, the lovely relationship you had with her, the great loss that must have been, anger towards your dad because, you know, he wasn't there all the time for you. Not only he wasn't there, but he was actually giving, you know, his time to this other woman, Margaret, and resenting that. And a good little bit of the ex-husband feeding you some nastiness about Margaret as well.
Yes, there was.
Whereas the new husband seems to be bridging that. And perhaps there are things that you might like to say to Margaret too, because she's also got feelings.
Yeah.
Shall we finish at that point?
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Just reflecting on what you've just gone through, worked on. Does anything occur to you? Any thoughts?
Talking to you, it has made me realise that maybe I did put the blame on Dad, and I've never looked at that angle before. And why should he understand what I need to hear? And that I must make take the first step and be very, very strong. And I am lucky because I've got a very supportive husband, and he's been wanting this to happen, and he's been trying to encourage it, and I just, you know, back off again. But it's been very, very helpful in talking with you. I'm sure I will now take the first step.
And I'd just love you to tell him that you love him, and be prepared for him to be incredibly embarrassed and not be able to say the very words you want to hear, but recognise that he will love hearing it, even if he's not at your mature stage of development of being able to say it. But you have heard him say it to his granddaughter.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So he can use the words, he just needs permission, because he comes from another generation where that's softy talk, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course you knows I love you.
That's right.
Okay, how are you feeling now?
Quite relieved, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel better.
Great. Okay, thanks ever so much for coming.
Thank you.
Smashing.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Jean, you've just had the interview with Linda, which was really fascinating to watch. And one of the things that I was really aware of was that you were using a very important basic counselling skill, which is reflection. Am I right?
It's so important because, you know, she was talking about the lady, so, you know, I need to either have a name, and I really had to ensure that I'd got her story right. Not my story, but like, then just to reflect, to say, is what I think I'm hearing right? I mean, in Rogerian terms, you know, Carl Rogers terms, it's reflecting everything they say, and there's lots of jokes about that, and people get like bored out of the mind having the thing just repeated. But you do need just to reflect, to let them have a look at it, and to make sure I did know what was going on for her.
And one of the things that came up in that reflection, it seemed to me, was that she actually was talking about a number of issues. And as somebody who's using counselling at a basic level, what do you do when you've got a number of situations, difficulties presented to you?
I suppose what was happening for me, Brenda, was just referring to pitfalls, like people will deal just with the presenting and won't look at the other one because it's too difficult for them. Or, as you can see in the pitfalls, psychoplonking and ignoring the presenting and looking for deep things that aren't even there. So what I'd heard there was the presenting problem was like my dad,
Right.
but like the other sort of clues she was throwing out was, you know, the death of her mum. So I had to kind of decide which one do I work on first.
Right.
I initially thought the death of the mum was probably the greater issue. But when we actually got to that, I think the working with her dad's stuff will probably move her on. It seemed that, you know, saying she recognised perhaps she had been into the blame game a bit.
Great example of the counsellor not sticking with what they think is the problem, but really listening and clarifying what the client or the person who's in that chair is saying. Also, what was striking about that session was that it felt so condensed and also moved so rapidly from the presenting problems to what Linda really felt was, at last, that's what it's about.
Isn't that wonderful? And her making that connection between behaviour with mother, not actually saying, Mum, I love you, and then behaviour with dad, not actually saying it, but wanting him to say it. And also a little bit of resentment that, you know, can say it to granddaughter.
Yes.
So, you know, she was nice to work with. It sounds awful, I was going to say because of her intelligence, but, you know, she very quickly made the connections. And that's like, it feels really good. Because, you know, she was doing it for herself. I wasn't saying and telling her what to do with her life, but she made those nice moves.
Wonderful session, thank you.
I hope she goes back and says, Dad, I love you, and not too worried when he says, don't be silly. But I think she's prepared for that. Yeah, thanks, Brenda, thanks. Right, so what would you like to talk to me about?
Well, I suppose the issue that's all the other issues sort of belong to, are part of, is, how do I to call it, ageing, or, so I'm just not looking forward to the second part of my life. I know I'm useful and needed, I have 2 children, I know I can do quite a good job in various ways, that I can give to people, you know, but I don't see anything for me, really, that I'm going to like coming along.
Well, that's sounding very sad.
It is, I think. I think I've suffered sort of intermittently from depression, which I didn't think I had the gene for depression until about 4 years ago. But I think mine is, it is the external circumstances that I don't like my reality in the future. So the crux of it is the fact that I'm single, I'm divorced, I'm middle-aged, and I'm running out. Yeah, the fact is, I think my chances of a sex life, and even more importantly, love, are diminishing rapidly. And at the same time, I guess its importance to me is increasing, because, well, partly because, and I think I've found this, other women that I've talked to today, sexually, I'm at my peak. I mean, I get more pleasure from it. I think I give more pleasure. It works better for me than ever before in my life. And the thought, but you know, older women are not sexual beings in the world's eyes. And to become a kind of dirty old woman. So part of my signals to myself is, got to stop. And I resent it, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of things in my life are okay. I mean, my children, I don't mean they're no problem, but they're adopted, and for quite a big period of my life, getting children was something, you know, a driving force, And I got there, and I was lucky, and I know it. And I've enjoyed them. And there's still a lot they need from me, but they no longer need so much that they fill the whole of my life. And, you know, what's the thing for older women? You do something useful, fulfilling, a job, hopefully. And you are a mother and a grandmother eventually, and I know there are people who find that, you know, I felt like, ideologically, I feel I should be able to feel like that about it, but I don't. I want to be a sexual being, and I want to go on being a sexual being.
What would you have to do to be a sexual being?
Well, I suppose I do it. I'm still doing it. Since I was divorced about 4 years ago, and I've had like a 1-year relationship, but I couldn't be in love with him, and I didn't know what being in love was like, and I wasn't prepared to compromise. So, you know, it was very nice. And then I've had a year of celibacy, nearly a year, followed by a short but very, very, very nice relationship. When we got into it, we knew he'd got a job in another country and was going. So, but it was lovely. But it just reminds me now of what I can't have.
So are you sort of saying to me that you're at a point where you're feeling old and you're not looking forward to the next decades of your life, and it means loss to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having to accept that the trouble is you don't feel old inside.
So tell me how you do feel inside.
I suppose much as I always did.
Which is?
Quite sexual.
Say that again and enjoy saying it. It's okay to feel sexual. And say that again.
Well, yes, I'm quite sexual, but in this society, is it okay at my age? You know, you don't want to become pathetic or ridiculous. And, there's a lot of issues, there's ageism and there's sexism, but they're not just internalised, they're out there really. So, I suppose when marriage ended, I think it had been a very wearing time. And then I thought, well, at least I'm free, I'll start again. And then it was a shock to realise that starting again in your 40s isn't like, you know, when I was last a single woman in my 20s. So, I suppose it's, yeah, I've got to live through the next few decades if I can. But quite often I feel that life's like it was a good party. I enjoyed it. There were bad bits, but mostly it was a good party, and I'd just like to leave it, please.
You'd like to leave the party? Are you in the party now?
Not at this instant minute, no. But I can enjoy things, right? You know, once I'm absorbed in things. So life has moments and hours and days that are fine, but sort of overall it doesn't feel too good, and the prospect of it going on and on like this it's kind of debilitating, because it makes it difficult for me to actually put energies into other things that I need to. I mean, I suppose I need to accept the reality.
And the reality is?
that I'm coming to the end of my sexual life before I want to. And sexual, that's a lot of it, but it's more than that. I think when I was young, I didn't really believe that love existed. I thought, you know, mixture of lust and liking and shared interests and but I did fall in love very deeply when I was in my early 30s with someone who was married and available. And I suppose when that didn't work, you know, then I accepted what I could have, which was children and a good relationship of a kind, but limited. This is my husband. But when that ended, I suppose I thought, well, this is it. I want the real thing now. And I think when you're young, there's always the hope that things will get better. And I've run out of it. Not totally, but a lot. So
I'm feeling your sadness. I'm feeling the kind of nemesis, the sort of crossroads.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing you 20 and hopeful.
Mm.
And then, did you say then that you married?
No, I didn't.
But it wasn't that good. You had a partner, but it wasn't that good.
I didn't know that things could be different or better. And this is not a criticism of him. I think both of us sold ourselves short in a way. And either he didn't want intimacy or I wasn't a person who could push him into it. I don't know. But we had a very deep friendship, I'd say. We were partners in... We actually only married so we could adopt. And that whole thing took up a lot of life and energy. And worked, you know. It was great. I think I thought at that period of my life, if I can have what I want, which is children, they didn't have to be mine biologically, that was fine, you know, just jumping through the hoops and getting them. I think I didn't realise that there'd come a time when I still wanted something else.
When is that time now? So I'm hearing that, you know, now you're kind of saying, I'm still a sexual being, but what I want, as well as, if not even more importantly than a sexual relationship, is also to feel loved and cherished, cared for, prized.
Yeah, and able to love. I mean, it's like you've got a lot of love dammed up in you and nowhere to give it.
Where is it in your body? Where is it dammed up? It's there, is it?
Yeah.
And who put that there? Who built the dam?
Oh, the dam. The love. Well, probably the person whom, I don't know, I suppose I built it, but I mean, it's, where is there to give it? If the person I fell in love with had been free or willing to take the risk, make the sacrifices necessary, which were far more extreme in his case than mine, I suppose that's where it would have gone.
So, as you said, you built the dam. Are you also saying, give this person a name? Who was this person that was married and unavailable? Any name? Any name?
Oh, call him Jack.
Okay, so you're saying that you built the dam. Eileen, are you saying Jack also helped to put a few parts of that dam there?
I didn't know I had the capacity till I met him, so in a way he dislodged a dam that had already been there.
Oh, right.
I think he and having the first child, like emotions that I probably blocked off, but wasn't aware of anyway. I mean, I think I became capable of feeling more deeply before I'd been aware of it. And it was quite brilliant at blocking painful feelings. A lot of practice in childhood. So,
tell me about that bit. You're choking up as you're talking about that. Tell me about the practice in childhood.
oh, no, nothing dramatic. I mean, I didn't have a horrendous childhood. Just I had a rather a difficult mother, and I mean, what I saw as a child was that my parents shouldn't have married each other because they were very unhappy, but they were working class Catholics, so there was no way out. But it was years later that I realised my mother would have been unhappy with anybody. I always knew she was unfair to my dad, but then I thought that's because, you know, she's married the wrong man and she's disappointed, but she was a person incapable of... I mean, it's sadder for her than for anyone else, because she was hard to live with. She was incapable of any kind of joy, I think. She's constantly, like, tied into herself, and the whole world let her down, large, small, anything, you know. It was never all right.
Is there any bit of you that's like your mum?
Obviously, I wouldn't want to say so, but I truly don't think there is, actually. It was as though maybe I went the other way too far. I mean, I'm like my dad in ways that I've not learnt. I mean, things like absent-mindedness and reading a lot and things. And when he was older, before he died, I remember seeing that we were, you know, ridiculously alike in some ways. But, no, I don't think I'm like my mother, but I think in trying not to be like her, she was very jealous, very possessive. She didn't love him, but he wasn't allowed to talk to anyone else, you know. She'd do this, if he was gardening and someone passed the time of day with him, she'd be at the door, and like, her nostrils would flare. And it'd be like, and then there could be hours and hours of unpleasantness. So everyone sort of tiptoed round a bit, not to upset her, which was impossible, but so, but I think that's where the like, there wasn't room for two people with temperaments in the family. Everyone else had to be very reasonable.
Okay. You mentioned the words you had a lack of joy. I'm wondering if you had perhaps a joylessness. I'm going to use the word script, a joylessness script as a little girl, that it's not, you know, it's not okay to be happy. I'm wondering if you've given yourself permission to be happy, to be sexual, to be you.
I think I did, but whether I mean, it's also coincided with that period in time, you know, the sexual revolution or whatever, so, you know, and I went to university, so ideas I'd imbued as a child I was able to reject. And I think I did reject them internally as well, mostly, because I don't think they ever set that hard on me. I think I did want... I wanted to avoid all the pitfalls I saw in my mother. To have friends, to be open, not to be jealous, not to be possessive, to be capable of you know, kind of letting go, high spirits. And I did, but I don't know, not as easily as if I hadn't had that childhood, perhaps.
Describe yourself to me now. I am. I am.
Oh, that's hard. Oh, I am different kinds of people, and all of them are genuine. Like, when I am high and happy, it's real. For the time that it lasts. And what am I? I can't answer that question.
You can. You can.
Well, I could answer it cynically. I'm a sexually predatory middle-aged woman. I'm a nice person. I'm a supportive friend. I'm, you know, quite good company. I'm incredibly irritating and forgetful and procrastinate and disorganised and lazy. I was with this bloke who was asking about my character flaws once. I got through a few of those, and then I said, and I quote poetry too often. He said, oh, well, oh God, that's, and the rest one could live with. I don't know. Does that sound mixed up?
No, you do know, and you said, I want you to do a bit of reframing. You said, I'm a sexually predatory woman, and I'd like you to turn that. Reframing is not rephrasing. I'd like you to reframe that and turn it upside down and say the same thing from a positive angle. So tell me that again.
I'm brilliant in bed.
Can you hear the difference? It's the same thing.
It isn't.
Who are the people saying that behaviour is sexually predatory? Tell me some names that come to mind. Well, names are difficult, but I do see, this is not just like projecting, I do see, like this last bloke was nice, but he was torn between, like, how old I was, and his reaction to me. And it was like, because he was 8 years younger. And I think he was disconcerted. When he found out your age, you mean?
No, I think he sort of, no, I think when he found out, he found me sexually interesting.
Or sexually brilliant in bed. So that sounds a bit like, you know, his problem rather than yours.
Well, I don't know. It's my problem. I won. I would have liked to have held on to him.
That was wonderful movement for me in hearing you say that, recognising that, you know, one bit is saying this is not right, you know, the negative messages about sexuality, work I've done, you know, women hearing it's dirty, it's wicked, you know, it's something you only do in marriage, dum-de-dum-de-dum. And the double standards going around in terms of, you know, you've talked about ages. No one wants an older woman, whereas, you know, older men with younger women.
Yeah.
All that kind of double standards and social acceptance. Tell me some women that you know that you think are sexually attractive to men who are over 50.
Do you mean public figures or?
Or anybody you know? Public figures.
I'm trying to think of anybody. Well, I suppose Susan Sarandon. I've no idea how old she is. But, I do see women who are, that I know. But I think it's like a difference between someone that you can accept is still sexually desirable and they're in a relationship, and someone who's looking.
Okay, so women over 50 who've looked and found somebody else are now seen as being sexually attractive women. I mean, who do you know in the media? Or
I can't think, partly because I think our culture doesn't leave much room for it.
Okay.
You watch foreign films, you see much older actresses.
Okay.
You give them parts that are, you know, that have, where they're not just being grannies or something.
I mean, what's coming to mind for me, you know, is the Joan Collins, you know, is the EastEnders. I've forgotten her name. Peggy in EastEnders. Barbara Windsor.
Yeah.
You know, well over 50, you know, into the 60s, and she certainly is marrying a very much a toy boy, and lots of other women. But you know, having said that, if you're feeling, I'm not supposed to feel sexual, it doesn't matter what's happening outside, really need to work on giving yourself permission. It's okay to feel sexual.
I don't want to feel sexual in a vacuum. I want to feel sexual with a man.
Can you see that if you're giving yourself permission to feel sexual, do you think that you actually pass that out? Do you think men will pick that up? Or do you think men might be picking up this closed?
I suppose my fear is that they're picking up the desire and thinking it ridiculous in me.
Who says they're going to feel that it's ridiculous?
Me, I suppose, but also the society.
Society is made up of millions and millions of different individuals. You're doing this to you. Society isn't doing this. You've got little monkeys on your shoulders, chunnering away, haven't you? You shouldn't behave like that. The oughts and the shoulds and the normative words.
I'm not sure that is so, because I think when I started out, you know, when I started out 4 years ago, I think partly it's the impact of people's reactions to me that's changed me, or made me afraid, I don't know.
People, name me two.
Oh, a whole bunch of blokes that I met socially who I think, you know, if I was 10 years younger, it's not that a matter of fancy, it's actually seeing you in the category of fanciable, of woman, you know. Sometimes it feels like you're being like desexed, turned into a neuter in the world's eyes.
You keep talking about the world, Leslie, and you keep talking about society, and
Well,
I'd like you to talk about you and what you can do for you.
I think for a lot of years I thought I could book it, you know. I didn't obey the rules. And then you discover that it's stronger than you. Like, didn't obey the rules about getting married, then needed to adopt, and it was a massive stumbling block. It's like someone discovering that it wins in the end.
What's it?
Society's norms.
Can we dump society? Tell me what else is it?
Well, they're inside people's heads, aren't they? The ones I fancy. Like this last one was very nice, treated me well. That's part of what was so painful.
Treated you well.
It was loving.
So it was painful that he left
It was
you.
a short term. I mean, the leaving was before we started, sort of thing. It was an agreed, you know, we would go on holiday and live in the present for a week.
So that's kind of two relationships you've told me about, by where you knew that there was no long term, the married man.
Yeah.
And then this one, before it even started, you knew that they were going to go. Was there an element of kind of safety with that, because, you know, you'd be able to escape from it? Didn't need commitment to that.
I think in a subtle way that might be true. Not so much escape from it, but I couldn't be disappointed because it was not going, you know, I knew before I started that it didn't have a future, so I couldn't be hurt as badly as by hoping.
So are you telling me you set that up to prevent you being hurt?
It didn't seem like that.
What does it seem like now?
I think it was more that don't know why I could risk being myself because it didn't have long-term consequences. I don't know,
So
that sounds weird.
Am I hearing I don't deserve long-term relationships or
I don't
long-term
deserve.
love?
I think you're damn lucky to get me, but I don't think it will happen.
Can you do the same with that? Can you reframe and turn that upside down?
No.
Try.
I say, I don't think it will happen, I said. I think the odds are against it. I can't change that. I can't say that I think the odds are in favour of it.
What's stopping you from saying it?
I don't feel it's true.
Try saying it, see what happens. Try saying it. Reverse that negative.
Oh well, the odds are the bloke I really like, really be intimate with, will come along and appreciate how wonderful I am and enjoy me, and we will get together and make a long-term partnership, and I don't believe it.
You had to add that little bit in brackets at the end. Is that about because you're not worth it?
I don't know. I don't know, no, I think it's more like not lucky.
Not lucky.
Mm. No, I actually think I think I'm a bit weird, really. And that means that, you know, it sort of cuts out a lot of blokes who want fairly conventional women who think and say fairly conventional things. So I think the odds are, you know, narrowed for me. And the amount of blokes I would enjoy having a fling with, there are far fewer that I can imagine having a life with. So I think the odds are against it. And the flings will run out.
I'm seeing a warm, open, sexual, attractive woman with the most beautiful eyes, giving off, don't sort of come near me because I'm not worth it, and a kind of sadness.
I don't feel as though I'm giving off, I'm not worth it, but
I kind of want you to open up that almost protective clothing, you know, and allow people to come in. You talked a little about depression.
Mm.
The definition for me as a therapist is depression is a blanket over anger.
Mm.
And if I get to the anger, the depression lifts. And it's that turning stuff in that creates depression, which you probably know.
I think I thought it was triggered by fear, really. I had a sort of panic when the marriage ended, like a lot of things had disintegrated I thought I could rely on. It was compensated for by the feeling of, you know, personal freedom again, maybe. But sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. You said you thought I was. So can you say it again? I've lost it. Yeah.
I think you were blocking out some of the lovely stuff I was saying. Sexual, open, attractive, beautiful eyes. But giving off a sort of keep away and kind of closed, and perhaps I was just saying I just love you to open up and let people in.
I think perhaps this is a thing that isn't to do with aging. It's
I think when I was quite young, I tended to end relationships before the bloke could end them. I mean, I assumed people wanting to jack me in, and they weren't. I found out later. So a kind of fear of rejection that made me get my rejection in first, I suppose.
Right.
But why? I don't know. Perhaps then, when I was young, I didn't want... I mean, I'd seen a nasty marriage at close quarters, and perhaps I didn't want too close a relationship.
I'd like to finish on a positive, and that was very much about, you know, I'd seen a bad marriage. Could you just recall one thing from our time together that feels positive? One thought or one feeling?
I think perhaps saying the unsayable.
Can you say it again?
All right, I'm a very sexual woman. And I'm brilliant in bed.
I think that would be a wonderful note to sort of finish the official counselling session.
Yeah.
Jeanie, you've just finished the session with Eileen, and fascinating it was to watch and listen to. What were the key counselling skills, basic counselling skills, that you were bringing out in that session?
I was concentrating on questioning. Open questions, open questions, open questions. What and how's, not why, because why is threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Why were you late? What happened to make you late? First one's threatening. With the second one, people open up. So it was open questions was, you know, primary, as well as doing the listening and the reflecting and the empathy. But specifically, I was concentrating on use of open questions in terms of basic skills, Brenda.
One of the things that I was aware of during the session was that Eileen was talking about society out there, their problem, them making me feel like this. And I was really aware of you getting her to own it, which seemed like really important. So what tips have you got about that for people who are involved in counselling as a core skill, really?
As a core skill, it's listening to the games that are going on, you know, the blame games, the psychological games, you know, they are making me do this. As against feeling that personal power, you know. I mean, I've used phrases like self-love, self-esteem, but, you know, it's empowering ourselves. There are things going on in society which are pretty awful. However, if we approach that with, in brackets, but I can't do anything about it, it's all of them and nothing to do with me. You know, it's kind of very sad. It's kind of linked with that assertiveness, you know, and it's about to have rights. And but it does lead on to that kind of depression, you know, if you're turning all this stuff in.
Right. And I noticed you did that. She said very early on in the interview there have been some underlying problems with depression, and then it was moved away from. And towards the end of the interview, you brought her back to that, to look at it again. Were you aware of doing that, that you wanted to come back to it later, but wanted to hear a story first?
I did it deliberately. I heard the words about lack of joy.
Right.
I've got theories going on, like, you know, role model of mother, and resistance to, I'm not like her, but hearing similar behaviours. And the interesting phrase of there was a lack of joy there, that joylessness script does bring about, can bring about, you know, depression, as against happiness scripts from parents. You know, it's okay to be happy, it's okay to be sexual, you know, it's okay to live, you know. That's against, you know, you were a mistake and
yes,
you know, you got a happy day today, you'll pay for it tomorrow, you know, and that kind of mentality. And I just heard this sort of lack of joy.
right.
So I did kind of shelve it and kind of come back to it, yes.
Two things that I thought were really important in terms of the way you worked with that material that was coming up was the the very important idea that depression is a blanket for anger, which I think that would be very useful for Eileen to sort of think about. But also, you were very comfortable with the issue of sexuality. Now, people who are in the basic stages of counselling, for some people it's like, oh, sexuality, can't talk about it, can't do it, and it's frightening.
Yep.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, for me there's two biggies, sexuality and bereavement. And those are the two which are based on, as a counsellor, at basic skills or at advanced level, is actually sitting and dealing with emotions and not blocking them. For a lot of people, sexuality is riddled with, I think I even mentioned it in the interview with Eileen, you know, of rude, wicked, naughty and negativity, as against gorgeous, lovely, terrific, you know, whether you're, I was going to say 6, but perhaps not 6, perhaps, you know,
whatever.
What's legal, 16, you know, to 100. It's about sitting with the tears as well. I mean, in this case it was about sexuality, and it was loss of love, loss of men. And it was also about the fantasy of, because this is happening to me now, it will go on happening. You know, incredibly irrational.
Right.
Because I am 50, in brackets, no man will ever fancy me again, so I might not as well try.
Yeah.
So you start with the rational, you make this emotive leap, and end up with this totally irrational emotive statement. I am 50, no one will fancy me again, therefore there's no point, I might as well.
And it was beautiful to see you beginning to empower her again. Great, thanks, Jeanie.
I just love that bit, didn't you? When, as against being, what did you say, a sexual predator? And reframe that.
I'm brilliant in bed.
Yes. Yeah, that was like, if nothing else happens, that was really good. I hope something will happen for her then, and some of that block, the dam she talked about,
will become unblocked.
Yeah, just move that and let some of that gush.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm okay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love me. I do have power. I'm 2 fingers up to society. I'm not responsible for society's views. You know, I have power, and I have rights, and here I am, chaps. You know.
Thank you.
So you have now seen some interviews, some painful ones, some with which you may have identified. The important part of the learning was to recognise things that you can now do that will enable people with issues and concerns. Those things being active listening, that means listening with your ears, your eyes, your heart and your brain, reflecting, creating rapport through positive body language, asking open questions, working on people's self-image, and then zipping them up.